Chair, Chair, your mic is a little garbled, it sounds like. I don't know. Sounds a little bit like it did the meeting the other night we had.
Okay, I want to stop the video and see if that comes clear. How's that now, Carl?
It's a little bit better, but it's still a little garbled. Maybe we can get started and see how it clears itself up.
Okay. I think it's an internet problem because last time working off this computer was everything worked just fine. So I will go ahead and call the meeting to order and do the roll call. Commissioner Snodgrass,
Here.
Commissioner Soltis,
Here.
Commissioner Brown,
Here.
Commissioner Bradbury.
Here.
Okay, and we're missing, sorry, you have to help me with the name. We're missing Commissioner Jordan. Hopefully he can join us later. So we'll go ahead to the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of minutes for November 3rd. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve.
I move we approve the minutes as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The minutes, motion to approve the minutes is approved unanimously. Michelle or Carl, do we have anyone for public comments tonight?
We do not.
Okay, then I guess we will move on to the agenda items. So Carl, you want to introduce our guests tonight?
Certainly, and thank you, Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. Tonight we are very lucky to have the representatives from the Department of Commerce with us, who will be presenting their perspective on the periodic update of our comp plan, their role in that process. And so this is kind of a piggyback or a juxtapose with what we heard last time from Puget Sound Regional Council. So you'll hear a lot of very similar things, I'm sure. But you know, we have sort of a certification process, and then we work with Commerce also to get ensure that we are compliant with Growth Management Act. And so we'd like to introduce Carrie. Is it Sally? Am I saying that correct, Carrie?
Silly.
Silly, thank you. Sorry.
Silly, yes.
From Commerce, a senior planner, and then also David, you'll have to help me with your last name because it's not on the screen in front of me, and now I can't remember what it is. You're muted.
Dave Osaki.
Osaki, thank you very much. Sorry about that. Also from Commerce, who will be touching on the more specifically on the housing side of things for our update. And so without further ado, I guess, Chair, if it's okay with you, I'll turn it over to Carrie Silly to lead us on.
Okay, let's roll.
Great, thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if I can do that. So give me just a moment to get the PowerPoint up, please.
And Commissioner Jordan has just logged on.
Okay, can everyone see that first slide?
Yes.
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 And can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Great. Thank you all for having Dave and I here tonight. It's really great to be able to come and meet with the communities that we serve, even if it's just virtually in this setting on Zoom. It's really great because, as you may know, Commerce is set up now as a remote agency. So we all work from home, and we don't really have the opportunity that we used to get out pretty frequently into our communities. So this is a great opportunity for us to kind of meet you all face to face and see the people that we work with. In fact, I know Michelle out there. I used to work with her at Port Orchard, so it's really great to see Michelle's face again. Hi, Michelle. But what we're here for tonight is we're here to kind of give you a couple of different aspects on comprehensive planning. We're going to go over the basics of comprehensive planning, and some of this is probably very old news to those of you who have been on the Planning Commission or in planning for a long time. You may know all of this stuff already, or it may just be a helpful refresher. And then some of you may be new to the Planning Commission or new to planning, and some of this could be useful to you as you get started on working with planning for the city of Gig Harbor. So we'll go through that kind of quickly just to give a basic overview. And then we'll also talk about your 2024 update. As you know, Gig Harbor and Pierce County are one of the jurisdictions that are required to do a periodic update, a full review and update of their comprehensive plan by the end of 2024. And so, like most of the cities and counties, you've already kicked off that process. You may be in the process of getting your consultants on board and getting your staff devoted to that process. And so as you get into that update, we just want to kind of acquaint you with the breadth of that subject and go briefly through all of the new things that each community will be required to look at and to address in this update. There are many new requirements from the legislature over the past couple of sessions, and particularly in the housing field. And that's what Dave Osaki is specifically going to speak on. He was brought on this year to work with missing middle housing as a specialist with Commerce. And he has a great deal of experience in this area. And I'm very happy to have him here as a co-presenter tonight. So I will talk about the comp plan basics and about where we're going with the 2024 update in general. Dave will come in to talk about housing issues specifically. And then at the end, we will talk about how Commerce in general can assist your staff and assist you throughout this process. And how we're available for you at any time to call us, ask us questions. We're a resource agency. We're not a regulatory agency, and so we're here to serve you, to serve the public, and to help you with our knowledge and to make that available to you throughout this process to make it easier for you. So without further ado, I will get started on this, and let me know if you want me to stop at any point. If there's a question, something you're not understanding, please let me know. So, legislature adopted the Growth Management Act, GMA, in 1990, and the GMA provides a statewide planning framework requiring local planning that is guided by state law and is regionally enforced. The GMA has 14 overarching goals to guide the development and adoption of local comprehensive plans and development regulations that implement those plans. The goals that you see here are not listed in order of priority, and some of these goals use soft words like encourage and protect, but some are more action words, things that you must do, like reduce and maintain. All of these goals should be looked at in your comprehensive plan and in your update to ensure mutual compliance and reinforcement between these goals. The required elements of a GMA comp plan for cities include these 5: land use, transportation, housing, utilities, and capital facilities. The land use element provides the layout for each community's future growth. The transportation, housing, utilities, and capital facilities elements all must include an inventory of what is existing and identify what's needed now and to accommodate future growth over the next 20-year planning period. A jurisdiction can include other optional elements in their plan to meet unique local needs or preferences. And these optional elements can include, for example, recreation such as parks and trails, economic development, ports, essential public facilities, and climate change adaptation. The GMA requires review and revision, if necessary, of each comprehensive plan and development regulations every 10 years. It used to be every 8 years, but now with this 2024 update and all of the ones thereafter, it will be every 10 years. This was changed very recently by the legislature. And the first step to the update will be a detailed review of your existing comp plan and development regulations, including your critical areas ordinance. Now, it's unlikely that any jurisdiction is really going to be able to look at their comp plan and make a finding of GMA consistency without making any revisions to their comp plan or regulations. And this is because ensuring consistency will require a consideration of updated population projections, amendments to the GMA statutes that have been made by the legislature since the last comp plan was adopted, decisions by the growth management hearings boards and court interpretations of GMA, also changes in your community and best available science updates. Jurisdictions that fail to complete the update will be ineligible for the listed state grant and loan programs that you see on this page. So if you either have these grants or you're looking to receive them in future, it will be important to have your comp plan updated and consistent with GMA. Pierce County and its cities, including Gig Harbor, are revised to update their comp plan by December 31st, 2024, and you have an additional year to update your critical areas ordinance. So comprehensive plans are implemented through development regulations. Development regulations are the specific controls that are placed on development and land use activities, and they must be consistent with and implement the comprehensive plan. Regulations are adopted into the city's municipal code, and they are the rules that inform what, when, and how development can occur and the process by which each permit application will be reviewed. Regulations provide predictability for developers and community members, and they also establish concurrency programs, which ensure that public facilities such as roads, water, and sewer are provided in a timely manner to serve development. So, when we think of development regulations, we often think of zoning regulations. Often these are structured around maximum densities and minimum lot sizes for efficient land use. Another way to look at zoning is in form-based code, which focus on the design details of buildings and how compatible they are with each other. Critical areas regulations set buffers and restrictions in critical areas. And these include areas such as critical aquifer recharge areas, including wellheads for groundwater, steep slopes, and landslide areas, fish and wildlife habitat areas such as streams and wetlands. We'll get more into critical areas later, but I just wanted to say what those were just in case someone wasn't familiar with all of those yet. Subdivision regulations set out the process for dividing land, and they assure adequate provisions for utilities, parks, schools, and other requirements of development. Public works standards set out street widths and other standards related to public facilities. And there are many other regulations that a city can adopt, such as design standards, signage, landscaping, and parking. All of these are set at the local level, and they are usually very individual, depending upon the needs and preferences of the community. One of the first things that every local jurisdiction had to do when the GMA was passed was to designate and protect environmentally critical areas. And these include frequently flooded areas, geologically hazardous areas, critical aquifer recharge areas, fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, including streams and wetlands. Local governments must use best available science to adopt regulations that protect the functions and values of these areas. Science is used to identify land that is prone to flooding or steep slopes. And these measures don't just protect the areas themselves, they also protect people from harm. And it's more important than ever to have these identified and adequately buffered as weather patterns and landscapes change with the impacts of climate change, such as from things like rise in sea level, increases in wildfire activity, and increasing severity of storm events. Planning for growth. So we all know that the state of Washington has been growing rapidly. Well, how does each county and in turn each city determine how much growth each one must plan for. The process of allocating population starts with the county getting a 20-year population growth projection from the Governor's Office of Financial Management. The county then suballocates that countywide target among its cities according to available land, water, and sewer capacity, among other things, with a limited amount of that population allocated to the rural areas. In the Puget Sound region, which includes Pierce County, the Puget Sound Regional Council provides guidance based on regional geographies, which allocates larger populations to cities and centers. And then each city decides how it will plan for its allocated growth in its own comprehensive plan. So now we get down to the level of the city itself, the city of Gig Harbor. The city of Gig Harbor adopted its first comprehensive plan in 1994, and its most recent comp plan was adopted in a periodic update in 2016. According to data provided by OFM, the city grew from approximately 3,750 residents in 1994 to approximately 12,500 today in 2022. That's an increase of over 300%. The city's 2044 population allocation, which is your projected population by that date, is 14,229. So the 2024 periodic update will be required to address how the city will accommodate and adapt to an additional 1,729 residents over the next 20 years, plus how it will also accommodate businesses, services, public infrastructure, and other facilities that will be needed to serve them.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Going back to your population chart for a moment, that from 2022 to 2044 is 22 years. And it shows a projection of a couple thousand people. That doesn't seem realistic at all, given what's happened here in the last, 10 years.
This is your population allocation from PSRC. Now, it's possible that the city could grow faster than that. It's possible it could not grow as much. Some of that, of course, will be dependent on the availability of housing. But this is just based on your PSRC population allocation right now. That can change over time too during the planning period. I don't know if Carl would want to speak to this at all.
Yeah, I could speak to it just a little bit, Carrie. So it's it's a minimum population that we're meant to meet over that. And keep in mind, we're talking about 22 years, so we're looking at a planning horizon. And we're meant to plan for that level of growth. Now, we don't actually ever get to 2044 before we plan for that growth again, so in 10 years, and actually now the way the legislature set it up, there's actually a checkpoint in the middle. So in 5 years, we're actually going to look at these numbers and look at how we've grown over 5 years and see if our targets are sort of on par or not. Now, whether or not there will be an adjustment made at that time, I think the legislature is still trying to figure that out, or PSRC and Commerce are still trying to figure out. For us, it's PSRC would be figuring that out, whether or not there will be an adjustment and whether or not there will actually be any kind of an amendment to the regional strategy through Vision 2050. There's been some discussion about that as well, which has not been something that's been done in the past. So there's still kind of more to come. Your point is well taken, but these projections are meant, to be really sort of showing what the minimum might look like. If we go over, you're not penalized, but if you're falling under, then you have to look at reasonable measures to accommodate at least what those numbers are showing. So that's kind of how it works. It's not, there's no real exact science to it. It's based on quite a lot of assumptions, and it's based on what has happened in the past in some ways, but also based on buildable lands. and what our capacity actually really and truly is. And right now, because we've grown as quickly as we have, we don't have a lot of space at the moment to accommodate more people unless we look at rezoning and building more density in those, for instance, in our centers of local importance. So, and that's a discussion that we'll have to have, of course, when we get into comp plan and whether or not we need to do that. Dave will touch on this just a little bit too when he gets into housing, House Bill 1220, and what's going to be required of us. So all of those discussions are going to kind of come together. Does that kind of get to the heart of you? I know it's not a very satisfying answer, Commissioner Soltis, but and Carrie, correct me if I misrepresented anything there, please. But that's kind of the best answer that most planners will be able to give you.
It's useful, Carl, because you mentioned capacity. That's, I think, what the commission may be concerned about. What is our capacity to continue to grow? And if it's 14,229 is a capacity estimate, then that probably makes sense. I mean, it's how much space we have left to build, and we don't really have that much left. So maybe 2,000 people is reasonable as a planning number. Thank you.
And, and what Carl said was exactly right, very succinct. Thank you, Carl. And, one of the things that's also new from the legislature is that going forward from 2024, each jurisdiction every 5 years will have to review and report on its comp plan implementation. How is it doing? A 5-year benchmark. Are you succeeding in implementing your comp plan goals? Are you meeting your targets? Are you falling below your targets? Just in general, how are you doing? And some of the important things will be, are you able to accommodate your population allocation? How are you doing in terms of permitting for housing, for issuing permits? And it's going to be something that is going to be more monitored than it was in the past to see how this is really working on the ground. If you are being able to accommodate your growth, if you're getting the growth in place, and if you are meeting targets earlier than just waiting for every 6 or 7 years until the new buildable lands and land capacity analysis studies are done. They're going to try to do it sooner, especially because we're now going to be on a 10-year cycle. So there will be more opportunity to revise comprehensive plans if necessary, if cities are not meeting their growth targets. So,
well, Carrie, can you identify which of the numbers on that chart are based on something like a census and which are projections? Because
let's see. All of them came from the Office of Financial Management. And so they were all based on that year, and they would be taken from the latest census and then extrapolated forward April 1st of each year, except for 2044, which is your actual population allocation for your next comp plan.
yeah.
Hey, Carrie, did that number, the 14,229, did that come from the revised countywide planning policies at Pierce County?
It came, yes, it did.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
So the comp plan update process steps are summarized in this slide, and this isn't really an exhaustive list of all the steps that each jurisdiction may need to take in order to update their individual plan. But in general, you identify the components of the comprehensive plan and development regulations that may need updating, and you establish your work program. You create a community engagement plan for early and continued public information and participation, including required notices. These will include both informal meetings and required hearings. And then you have capital facilities, data gathering and planning. This is kind of important. And in the past, it's been somewhat neglected in some comprehensive plans. But the capital facilities plan needs to demonstrate that the city and its urban growth areas can be supported by adequate public facilities to sustain urban level development and the population allocation. So the CFP has to include an inventory of existing capital facilities and future needs, and at least a 6-year plan for financing public facilities, and that's your capital improvement program, which is usually adopted every year. So the land use element, capital facilities plan, and financing plan must all be coordinated and consistent with each other. Parks and recreation facilities owned by the city must also be included within your capital facilities element, even if a separate parks element has also been prepared in your comp plan. Oops, sorry about that. Wow, what happened here? My apologies. You will also need to coordinate with adjacent local jurisdictions, and the comp plan must also be consistent with the countywide planning policies and PSRC's Vision 2050. Coordination will also be recommended with DFW, Department of Fish and Wildlife, with the Department of Health and the Department of Transportation. And in this session, also the legislature passed new regulations for coordination with tribes as well. I am not sure if Gig Harbor has any tribes that it generally coordinates with. The closest that I saw was the Squaxin tribe, but I'm not sure if you're within their usual and accustomed grounds, so that they may not specifically apply to you. But if a tribe requests to be included in your comprehensive planning process, there is now a procedure in the RCW for that to take place. After that, there will be draft documents, reports, and maps to issue on which you will do your SEPA determination and environmental review. There will be a 60-day notice to commerce, which is how all comprehensive plans, amendments, and development regulations are handled. They're submitted to commerce for 60-day review and comment, following which you'll take legislative action by your council for adoption. A notice of adoption will be issued. And that the transportation element is the only one that's required to be approved by an outside authority. That must be certified by the PSRC. (2024) required legislative updates. So a number of the changes to the GMA were made by the legislature in 2021 and in 2022 that will affect the city's 2024 comp plan update. House Bill 2020, the first one on here, made significant changes to the GMA housing goal and the requirements for the housing element. And my colleague Dave Osaki will provide more information on these requirements at the end of this presentation. So just to go through these quickly, HB 1241 changed the periodic update and the Shoreline Master Program update cycle from 8 to 10 years. This is where the requirement came in for requiring a 5-year implementation progress support and a work program. House Bill 1717 has new regulations for local jurisdictions to include the tribes in the planning processes and decisions upon request. HB 2001 expands the ability to build tiny houses, so that will need to be addressed in your housing element as well, and your regulations. SB 5042 changes the initial effective date of certain actions under GMA. SB 5118 amends the definition of essential public facilities. This was largely due to putting into essential public facilities a requirement for juvenile facilities and juvenile reentry facilities. SB 5235 removes certain restrictions on ADUs and occupancy limits. This has mostly to do with cities no longer being able to require that an ADU or the primary unit be owner occupied, and it removes occupancy restrictions, maximum number of people occupying a unit unless there is a building code or fire code restriction. SB 5593 allows a county to revise a UGA boundary to accommodate patterns of development. This now provides another way to revise a UGA by taking some area from a UGA in one place and adding it to another. as long as you don't actually change the amount of population that you're going to be allocating. You don't change your population allocation, and you don't change the overall amount of acreage within the UGA, and you don't also take in new critical areas. And Dave, I think here is where your slides start. So just let me know as you want me to change them.
Okay, thanks, Kara. I will pick up from here to talk a little bit about some of the changes to the requirements to the housing element. A little bit of background about myself, but not a lot. My name is David Osaki, and prior to coming to Commerce, I was the Community Development Director for the City of Mukilteo. I have some ties to Pierce County because I was at one time Community Development Director for the City of Fife. And you can sweep aside all the professional work. Some of my favorite work in planning is I was on the Planning Commission for the City of Puyallup for 8 years, and on the Planning Commission for the City of Federal Way when I lived there for about 8 years. And I only mention that because I just want to thank you all as planning commissioners for your commitment to your community. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of reading, a lot of study, and you're involved in really the body of making law, because when you get into the ordinances and development regulations especially, you are one board and commission that has your fingers in what the law will be. And so that's something to be taken with a great deal of seriousness, and I appreciate all your work. And I always like to tell planning commissions I've worked with over the past 30 years that the two things that I really ask of planning commission is, one, you just treat each other nice and cordially, and two, you try to build your body of knowledge. And so by virtue of having Carrie and I here tonight, you are building your body of knowledge that will make you more effective planning commissioners as you move forward to your 2024 update. So what I want to talk about a little bit is House Bill 1220, and Carrie mentioned that, and that involves some changes to the housing element. I'm only going to pick up on some of the, what I would consider some of the more significant changes to the housing element. There are other changes, but out of deference to the amount of time that you have as a planning commission tonight, I just want to hone in on a few key items. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the change to the GMA housing goal. And I'll talk a little bit about a requirement to analyze projected housing needs by income bracket, and that'll have some relationship to capacity. And then I'll talk a little bit about the requirement that was added to evaluate racially disparate impacts, exclusion, and displacement. So next slide. Let me just talk really quickly about the context for housing. From 2000 to 2015, the estimate is Washington State fell over 225,000 homes short of meeting its housing needs. And the Puget Sound Regional Council, as part of its regional housing strategy and Vision 2050, indicates that we fell back about 4,600 housing units needed to address the housing needs and growth that occurred between 2010 and 2020. So we already have a backlog of needs. And then the projection in Vision 2050 is that there will be a need for 810,000 new housing units to accommodate our 30-year population growth for the 4-county Puget Sound region, which is Kitsap, Pierce, Snohomish, and King counties, a growth of 1.6 million people. And so if you take into account, I think the city of Seattle is somewhere between about 700,000 and 800,000 people right now. Basically, the Puget Sound Regional Council is projecting we'll be adding 2 Seattles between now and 2050. And housing shortage is not new. I think you know very well that if you read the newspaper, follow the news, or do any of that, the issue regarding the crisis of housing and housing affordability is not unique to the state of Washington. Oregon and California have taken some steps in their laws to better plan for housing needs. But I think you'll find across the nation that a variety of different states and local jurisdictions are trying to deal with the issue of affordable housing. And then while we deal with the issues of housing and the shortage and shortfall of housing and the rising cost of housing for all, there are housing disparities in the state of Washington. And so there was a Washington State Home Ownership Disparities Work Group from the Department of Commerce that produced a report this year. And it indicates that the home ownership rate for minority households in the state of Washington is about 20% lower than that for non-Hispanic white households. And the rates of cost burden, which basically means the amount of money that you're putting towards your housing, is highest for minority communities. So, we have this overall need for housing in the state of Washington, the Puget Sound region, but we also have some issues specifically to minority households in the state as well. So the next slide. So let me focus on that first item. I talked about a change to the housing goal, and as Carrie mentioned earlier on, there are 14 state planning goals, and those goals are intended to guide the preparation of your comprehensive plan and your development regulations. And so House Bill 1220 amended the state housing goal. And previously, it had the word encourage the availability of affordable housing to all economic segments. And now that housing goal reads plan for and accommodate housing affordable to all economic segments. So if you just kind of read the language, encourage is much more softer than what the current goal language is. The current goal language is you plan for and accommodate. And if you just, for context, the new housing goal as revised is down below. So we're going to plan for and accommodate housing affordable to all economic segments of the population of the state, promote a variety of residential densities and housing types, and encourage preservation of the existing housing stock. And what I like to tell people is that why this is so important, not only does it change the tone and tenor of the goal, but in the 30 years that I've been doing planning in the state of Washington, actually I've been doing planning longer than that, but I was doing planning when the Growth Management Act was passed. I can't think of a time when any of those 14 goals was ever amended. So this is the first time that a goal, state planning goal was amended. And I think just by virtue of the fact that it was amended, lends credence to how important housing is as an issue right now. I lost my train of thought. Oh, and I guess there actually, just so for context, so that no one takes us out of context, when the Growth Management Act was passed in 1990, there were actually 13 state planning goals. And then by virtue of the Shoreline Management Act integration with the Growth Management Act, the 14th goal got added relating to shorelines. But putting aside that addition of that 14th goal, this is the first time I've actually seen a goal, statewide planning goal ever amended. So next slide. So I want to talk about a couple of the changes to the housing element requirements, which are pretty significant changes that you'll be dealing with as a planning commission as you do your 2024 update. And your staff, quite frankly, is going to be putting in a lot of time on these issues as well. One of them is that there is a requirement in the act now that jurisdictions conduct an inventory and analysis of existing and projected housing needs necessary to manage projected growth. And Commerce, under the act, is to provide those projected housing needs to the counties and local governments. And what's unique about this provision of this information and this projected housing is that the projections of housing are going to be defined by income bands or income brackets. And I'll have a table on the following slide that'll show that a little bit better. But Commerce is to provide projected housing needs to counties and local governments for moderate, low, very low, extremely low income households, as well as permanent supportive housing and emergency housing and emergency shelters. And that moderate, that low, that very low, and extremely low income households are defined in the act by income brackets. So this table to the right identifies, again, extremely low, very low, low, and moderate income and other, and it shows you the area median income and what percentage of area median income each of those housing unit bands fall into. So keep this table in mind. So Commerce is going to provide projecting housing needs over the 20-year time horizon, and Commerce is going to do it by income bracket, and it's going to be up to the local jurisdiction to plan the needs for the needs of housing by those income brackets. So we'll go to the next slide. And I'm going to apologize on this a little bit because I probably broke some rule about how many numbers to put on a PowerPoint slide. But this is the, well, these numbers are still being worked on, but this is going to be pretty close, I think, to what ultimately will be the case. And we're just using some samples, some representative samples of counties, King County and Spokane County. And you can see total housing, future housing needed by 2044. There's some numbers, but the important, I think, part just for you to kind of understand right now are the columns. So the columns, that 30 to 50%, that 50 to 80%, there's a 0 to 30%, 80 to 100%. Those match up with those terms I use, the low income, extremely low income, very low income, and moderate income housing. And so what will happen is that once these numbers are kind of finalized per the county, then these will get disaggregated to the individual jurisdictions. So at some point in time, as you as Gig Harbor and every other city in Pierce County and the other counties as well that are planning under the Growth Management Act, you will have specific numbers tied to these income brackets. And you as a jurisdiction will need to plan to accommodate housing for those households in those income brackets. And you're going to have to identify you have sufficient capacity to accommodate households for those income brackets. So just in the past, if you've been on the Planning Commission for a while, you're familiar with buildable lands. And that buildable lands process we talked about a little earlier is where you identify you have sufficient capacity to accommodate your anticipated population growth over the planning horizon. Now you're going to be asked to also identify and document that you have sufficient capacity to accommodate households associated with these particular income brackets that are assigned to you through this process, or you're going to have a countywide process to do that. So next slide. And so, like I talked about, this slide just kind of talks about the process a little bit more that I just described. And the first thing I want to put out is just mention is that Commerce produces guidance documents for a variety of different topics. And so Commerce right now is producing a guidance document. And really what the guidance document is, it provides direction and suggestions for local governments on how to actually comply with the requirements of the Act. And so these are written documents that are being produced. They get reviewed by advisory committees. They get put out to local governments for comment and review. And Commerce right now is in the process of preparing a guidance document for this allocation process. So the actual allocation process and identifying these needs is still being worked on in terms of these guidance documents. But Commerce is preparing the guidance documents. The process will be that the countywide housing needs, because these housing needs will be provided on a countywide basis by income bracket, will be allocated. So we're recommending that counties use some type of coordination process with the cities and towns for that allocation process, and that the local governments agree to their projected housing needs in their allocation. That the accommodate housing allocations by income bracket. You need to accommodate housing allocations by income bracket. And what I mean by that is you as a local government needs to do sufficient analysis to show there's capacity to accommodate those households by those various income brackets. So there's a provision in the Act that talks about you have to identify sufficient capacity of land. And that may, depending on how your projected needs align with your current land use designations and zoning, it may result in you have to address it through your plan and zoning amendments to accommodate those housing needs. If there's some misalignment where you're not able to accommodate the needs at the current zoning and plan, that you'll have to do some plan amendments and zoning to accommodate housing allocations by income bracket. And then you'll need to document programs and actions needed to achieve housing availability. And all that means is we'll want you under the Act to take a look at local funding, any barriers to development regulations that basically hinder bringing market on sooner rather than later, or just basically hinder bringing housing onto the market. An example might be, you may have certain types of housing that requires a conditional use permit, and then you may have builders that may not want to go through that process because of the uncertainty of whether or not they're going to have their conditional use permit approved or not approved. So you'll take a look at that to see if that's a barrier, the conditional use permit process, as an example, to bringing housing on the market. And I think I may have one more slide. I do have one more slide. So we'll go to the next one. So the third item I wanted to talk about, so we talked about the goal, the change in the goal. We talked a little bit about the projected housing needs that'll go to local jurisdictions and your obligation as a local jurisdiction to identify sufficient land capacity for those housing needs by income bracket And then the final item I want to talk about is that there are amendments made to the housing element under House Bill 1220 about racially disparate impacts, displacement, and exclusion. So again, the housing element is looking for housing for all, to try to accommodate housing for all populations. But we also have some recognition that there's certain populations that may have experienced impacts in the past that have made housing affordability or ability to afford housing, whether rental or owner, more difficult today than it might be for other groups. And so there's a requirement under the Act to do some analysis of racially disparate impacts, displacement, and exclusion. And so those communities planning under the Growth Management Act need to identify local policies and regulations, or at least look in their comprehensive plans and regulations for any local policies or regulations that result in racially disparate impacts, displacement, or exclusion in housing. Should you find those, then there's a requirement to implement policies and regulations that begin to undo those impacts. You need to identify areas at higher risk of displacement and establish anti-displacement policies. And again, there's some commerce guidance to local governments that's being developed right now to address these particular, the racially disparate impact requirements. And all the draft guidance documents as they get prepared are on the Commerce website. And certainly you can take a look at those and see some of the webinar trainings that have been going on if you want to get into that level of detail. The map on the right is that the Puget Sound Regional Council has prepared an anti-displacement map, areas at higher risk of displacement. And so for the 4-county region, there's actually some information that's already been prepared by the Puget Sound Regional Council. And you can actually go on there and take a look and see how Gig Harbor or some other communities fare in terms of areas at risk of displacement. And I think that would be my last slide.
Thank you, Dave. So in sum, I just wanted to have a slide that talked a little bit about how Commerce can assist local jurisdictions and specifically the city of Gig Harbor. As I said earlier, Commerce is not a regulatory agency, and we don't approve your comprehensive plan or periodic update. This stands in contrast to, say, the Department of Ecology, which actually must approve your shoreline master program when it's updated. So that's not our role. But what we do is we do offer grants for periodic updates and other planning work. And for example, Gig Harbor is going to receive $125,000 through Commerce for your periodic update. Gig Harbor has already applied for it. And I know that our grants team is working very hard on all of the 2024 grant allocations, and hopefully we'll have those out very shortly. And I believe that Gig Harbor also currently has a middle housing grant, which I believe Dave, are you the contact for the middle housing grant for Gig Harbor?
I am, yeah.
Great. So that should actually provide a lot of background information, data, and guidance for your housing element update in the sense of your middle housing work, missing middle housing. That should be very helpful for that part of your update. And then Gig Harbor also currently has a climate change grant with the Department of Commerce, planning for climate change. And this can inform your land use element, definitely your critical areas ordinance regulations, potentially your capital facilities and transportation element as well. So right now you'll have 3 grants from Commerce, which should be very impactful and helpful for your periodic update. There are other grants. I think we're going to have a second round of climate grants available in the next fiscal year, which I believe they'll also be available for cities that have also received them if they have another proposal that either builds upon or is a new proposal for climate change. So, we keep an eye out for those grants, which can be supplemental and help you along with your periodic update. We also provide technical assistance and advice for your planning staff throughout the update process. Now, we provide this advice at any time, of course, not just during the periodic update, but usually that's when we're most frequently contacted by staff is during these periodic update times. And each one of us, planners like myself, are assigned to a geographic region. I'm assigned to Pierce County, Thurston County, and part of King County. And so I'm always here for staff. And if I don't know the answer, my job is to find it. So it may not be something that I know right away, but it's either going to be something that I will track down in-house or with our legislative contacts or with other state agencies. It's my job to track that down so that your staff doesn't have to work to do that. So we're always here for that kind of advice. We also provide public information and assistance. Commerce has a great number of resources online. We have so much out there in terms of guidebooks and booklets and very helpful information on a wide number of planning topics that you can refer the public to. We try to keep that updated. We've just done a lot of updating on our comprehensive plan site in preparation for this round of updates. We have a lot of general planning information as well. So feel free to refer the public to our website. We don't really work one-on-one so much with the public, but we do, when we're asked to come to public hearings, if you want Commerce's support for something that you're doing, whether it's a comp plan update, a critical areas ordinance update, something that we've reviewed, we support what you're doing. We're happy to provide that support and assistance whenever we're requested. And then the comp plan itself, with your 60-day review, that's the formal time at which we review your update, but we're always available to review drafts before it goes to the Planning Commission, after it goes to the Planning Commission, at any time through the process. If staff wants to submit a draft element or draft of regulations or an ordinance and just say, hey, what do you think of this? Do you think that there's any issues? We're happy to look at drafts. They don't have to be formally submitted. And it's not going to take 60 days to get an answer back. And we like doing that. We'd rather see something in the development stage and be able to offer early input and maybe offer to, some coordination with other agencies as needed, rather than get it at the end of the process when it's already gone through hearings and everybody is expecting to just get it approved. And we have to say, but wait, we don't like to do that. You don't like it either. So we love to be called in early when we can help. So, we're here and, we're really happy, Dave and I, that we could come tonight and we could talk to everyone and we could meet you and we could tell you a little bit more about the comprehensive planning process and what we do and what we can offer. And I'd be happy to take any questions and Dave as well. So I'll end here. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Okay, questions for Carrie or Dave?
And I will stop sharing my screen as well.
Yeah, John, I have a question if I may. David, thank you for your presentation. Both of you, thank you for your presentations. But David, I'm as a relatively new commissioner going through my first comp plan update shortly here. I'm most worried about the difficulty of the housing challenge ahead of us. And your presentation was illuminating, and it kind of actually makes me more worried about the housing than I was before, because this could be a very difficult challenge to deal with. There's a lot of projections that Commerce has made about the necessary housing units for across the areas, and it translates back to Pierce County, and I guess Pierce County then translates a number to Gig Harbor to work with. And HB 1220 got a lot of discussion in Gig Harbor this last year about the infill process, and I'm just going to ask you one specific question about that. Is that going into infill, is that one of the major solutions for bringing the middle income or the middle missing middle housing section into Gig Harbor?
It's really going to depend on your jurisdiction and what your jurisdiction's values are and where you feel it would be appropriate to accommodate the different types of housing. It is one possible solution. It may not be the only solution because there's a variety of other different housing types besides just middle housing. But middle housing, the reason why we're talking about middle housing is that it's been one of those housing types that existed years and years ago. But, right now, if you kind of look at the housing, you got single family housing, and we always talk about multifamily housing, but we don't always talk necessarily about that housing that kind of fits in between single family and multifamily. And so it's being looked at right now as an opportunity to work towards your housing targets. But it may not be the only option that you have as a jurisdiction. So the Growth Management Act as amended asks that you at least look at middle housing. But whether or not it's integrated into your formula for accommodating your housing target, those are going to be local decisions you need to make.
Was that to me?
I believe it was Commissioner Snodgrass.
My question is for Dave, or Carrie. You mentioned with the missing middle grant that there would be a lot of useful background information in that grant. Do we have access to that and that background information?
I think a better way to say it, well, maybe this is what I said, is that as well, the answer is going to be yes. Let's put it that way. So as we work with jurisdictions on the missing middle, or the middle housing is what we're calling it, we're bringing on a consultant to work on development regulations, design standards, graphics, 3D graphics to kind of simulate how middle housing might be integrated into single family or lower density households. We're also going to be working on communication materials to talk about the relationship of middle housing with some of the issues that have been raised. Does middle housing compete with like tree canopy issues? So we're going to be having some information that discusses that. We'll have information that talks about parking, what might be examples of parking for middle housing if it's integrated in single family residential zones. The answer to your question is yes. And we're starting to build a website that'll have all that information available to staff, planning commissioners, and the general public.
I think one of my big questions, interest areas, concerns is going to be centered on really identifying what housing and sort of what income brackets Gig Harbor needs to be targeting.
And so that's kind of the other component of what I talked about. I mean, for the middle housing grants, we're going to have a variety of information. But for these broader issues about racially disparate impacts and the housing needs projections and the sufficient capacity and the allocation, there are guidance documents being prepared right now, literally being prepared right now. We have a consultant on board to kind of provide the recommendations and suggestions for local governments.
I've seen a lot of the research that Pierce County has. I have appraised a few
Right.
MFTE properties over there and proposed ones. So I've seen some of that, but more specific to Gig Harbor.
Oh, I don't think it's necessarily specific to Gig Harbor. It's guidance document for the housing element that'll be hopefully usable for all local governments regardless of size across the state. But at some point, those numbers that I talked about are going to be provided at the county level to Pierce County, and there'll be a process for Pierce County to work with the cities and towns to do that allocation across all the cities and towns in Pierce County.
Yeah, and if I could jump in, Dave, as I understand it, the process that we will go through in Pierce County will probably run through the Growth Management Coordinating Committee. And it's probably going to look a lot like our population, employment, and housing targets that we have to go through to update the countywide planning policies to ensure that we're consistent with Vision 2050, Puget Sound Regional Council's plan for and regional strategies for growth, regional growth strategy. Sorry, I couldn't find the term. And so I think that process is going to look very similar to that. And so all of the jurisdictions will get together, and we'll be bringing those conversations back both to council to start, and and it may end up coming down to planning commission as well, depending on how the conversation goes. And to further that, they've actually given us sort of a sneak peek at the tool that will be used. It looks a lot like the spreadsheets that Dave was showing. I assume that those were sort of taken out, Dave, from that tool that they're using. Is that right?
Right, yeah.
And I've played around with that a little bit, but only dangerously, because I don't exactly know what all the inputs are that are supposed to go in. I'm not skilled enough. We haven't really been trained on how to use the tool yet. So they've just kind of given us a sneak peek on it. But we will have that. Hope they're saying in December. So. Chair, we've lost your voice almost completely at this point. I'll just, if I could, I'll just jump in and because I kind of have an idea of what you're asking, and that is if any other commissioners have questions for Dave or Carrie. Sorry, Chair, we've lost your connection almost completely. If I could suggest that we look to the Vice Chair to continue the meeting for us.
Okay, that's fine, Carl. I think, but no one has any other questions, and not sure what John had to say, but we'll have to probably catch up on that later. But thank you for those presentations. They were very helpful to, I think, to all of us, building our knowledge base, as David said. So thank you for taking time to attend tonight and share your expertise with us. And Carl, I guess we can move on to the next topic on the agenda.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would also like to echo that. Thank you, Carrie and David, very much for coming. We really do appreciate it, and we look forward to many more conversations with you over the next couple of years to ensure that we're getting this right.
Great. Have a good night.
I don't believe Vice Chair Soltis, I don't believe we have anything else on the agenda for this evening.
Okay, I thought I had seen some charts, but
Just the next meeting.
that's the next meeting. Okay. Well, I guess this is probably time for any other business that may need to be brought forward to the commission. So I'll ask if the other commissioners want to bring up anything that needs to be discussed tonight.
See if you can hear me any better. Am I still breaking up? No, okay. I have to say that for next time.
Okay. Any other business from the commissioners?
I have a couple of things, if I may.
Go for it.
I've discussed with the chair and the vice chair the idea of having a social get-together this year so that we could actually see in person some of the commissioners we haven't met yet. The idea would be a completely non-business meeting. The agenda would consist only of more detailed introductions from each of us, discussion, questions and answers, and the rest. Just to continue with this idea, it could be done on a date like Sunday, the 11th of December from 3 to 5 in the afternoon. And I have an available venue for this agenda at that time and place. And I guess what I'd like to know is how do the other commissioners feel about a get-together like that? And would that particular time and date be something that would work for everyone?
let's go around the room.
Let's,
Jason?
Commissioner.
Hi, yeah, sorry, everyone, I'm not on camera today. I'm shuttling kids around, but listening closely. I think that's a great idea, Commissioner Brown. I really appreciate you offering it up, and I'm 99% confident I can make that time work. So thank you. Thanks for the suggestion.
I agree. I think it's a great idea, and at least at this point, I could meet the time. I'd have to look at the calendar again, but the best guess is yes.
good.
Commissioner Snodgrass?
I love the idea. My only concern is open meeting rules or whatever that is.
Oh, the venue?
Get around that, like the idea of all of us meeting together, and is there anything we have to do to make sure that we're all legal on that and good? Because I love the idea of it.
Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Snodgrass. I do have some reservations about it. Of course, I have to be the stick in the mud here a little bit. But I do believe that that could be problematic. I'm certainly willing to bring it to the city clerk's attention and tomorrow and have a discussion with Josh and see and make sure that we wouldn't be in violation of OPMA to do something like this. And if so, as an alternative, I might offer that I could also talk to the city clerk about making our next meeting on December 8th an in-person meeting in our community room A and B. We do have the ability now. We've tested it. We've used the hybrid model, and so it seems to be working just fine. So it would allow the public to view the meeting and allow you all to meet in person, which would then maybe facilitate some of that getting to know each other a little bit before and after the meeting without being in violation of any OPMA rules and guidance. Just my recommendation.
Commissioner Krausnak, are you online yet?
Still here.
No, sorry, John, can't hear you. Well, I think we have to be respectful of what Carl's suggesting here. So I personally can make the 11th, and I would like to do this if it's within the legal purview. And John, can you give us a thumbs up or visual thumbs up if you think it's a good idea? All right, well, I'm not hearing John. Oh, there's the thumbs up. He's getting a slow connection. So we got a lot of thumbs up on the idea, Carl.
Okay.
And let's not make a decision at the moment. Let's get your read from the clerk. And maybe you get back to John with the answer ASAP so that
Yep.
we can continue this idea, or maybe we have to drop it if it's not quite legal.
Yeah, I'll look into it tomorrow, commissioners, and get an email out. We can put an email out to everyone. Of course, please don't respond, all back to the email. But if we're able to do it, then we could, we can try and coordinate it through staff. But just so you know, my initial thinking is that it probably won't be allowed. But I'll see what I can do. And if it won't be, then we could shoot for that December 8th in-person meeting.
Yeah. If I may, Carl, I did some research on this issue, and my conclusion, having done that research, is that a social meeting like this would be permissible. So I didn't naively suggest this. So just make sure that you understand that.
I believe that, Commissioner Brown. I don't like to go in blind without bringing the city clerk into it. The city clerk really has the gavel or the authority, so to speak, on things of this nature. And I'll say, the council members oftentimes like to come to city functions, and staff functions, And we're always very careful about the number of council members that are allowed to come to those functions. And we're also very careful about what tables that they sit at, making sure that they're not all sitting together and discussing. And a lot of it comes down to, and I know it seems odd, but a lot of it does come down to appearance, you know, and this is all about the appearance of fairness and open public meetings and transparent government. So that's why we get a little bit more uptight about these things. So I see that Commissioner Jordan has his hand raised as well, Chair.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I appreciate the staff's perspective on this. I deal with this in my day job as well. Carl, I just asked after you had the conversation with the clerk, you know, I've also experienced agencies noticing the meeting. So we could notice the meeting as a public meeting, and then the community could come if they wanted to come. But I think that's an option too.
That's a fantastic idea, Commissioner Jordan. I'll mention that to the city clerk as well.
Thank you.
And our next meeting is December 1st, I believe, not 8th.
Oh, so sorry. Thank you, Michelle.
No problem.
I've got a couple other quick things, if I may. We took a look at the RFP that was issued by Robin for the assistance on the comp plan update. That's an excellent document. Robin, I think you did a really first-rate job on that. And the reason I'm mentioning it, in addition to giving Robin a pat on the back, is to say that it's a good basic primer for getting started on the comp plan review process. And I learned quite a few things from studying that document. So I recommend it to all commissioners if they haven't had a chance to read it yet. Another question I have, and I guess this goes to Carl, is where do we stand, Carl, on understanding what the terms of office are these days? For example, we've elected a chairman and a vice chairman, but it isn't clear to me whether their terms go to the first of the year or until the first of 2024. And I think we ought to clarify that just so that we know who's going to be around when. And the other related issue is several of us have terms expiring this coming June. What's the calendar like for us to indicate whether we wish to be considered for an additional term or not? And what can you tell us about the process involved in addressing that?
So I made a note about clarifying the terms, and that is something that's sort of ongoing with council. They're reviewing the guidelines that they adopted recently. Again, there's going to be some changes made to those. And so that's still a bit of a work in progress. So I will talk to, again, the city clerk to clarify that and try and get you a succinct answer. I think it's a very good question.
Well, we're down one commissioner as it stands today. Can you give us any status on filling that position?
Yeah, we put that back out. We advertised for the position, and we have one application that's come in, and I believe that is going to be proposed to council, I think, on the 28th of November.
I looked all over the city website and I didn't see any notice of that vacancy or the desire to recruit for it. Did I not find it or what?
No, it should have been there. I saw it when it went out.
It's
Where
under
would
public
it,
notices.
under public notices? All right, I'll take another look. Okay, you understand my concern. If this business of the terms drags on, we really won't know. I won't know, for example, whether if I decide to apply for an additional term, where things stand until perhaps the last minute, which would be June. So I think it would be a good idea if we could figure out how to resolve those term issues well in advance of the end date. Did I make that clear?
You did, Commissioner Brown. I will talk with the city clerk and get you some succinct answers on that, and I will send that out to the full commission.
I
Thank you.
believe they opened the application process in May for the June terms. And anybody who wishes to reapplies just like a new candidate.
In May.
So Carl, you
Thank-
will look for your update and kind of
Yeah.
clarification language next time, or maybe, well, as soon as you get it, I guess you could email it out to everybody. That's not a problem, is it?
Not at all. No, we'll confirm it and we'll put together an email with a bunch of these answers in it for y'all.
Okay, anything from anybody
you.
else? Then I guess we can entertain proposals to end the meeting.
I'll move for adjournment.
We've got,
Second.
I'll second that.
all right, we've got a second. I didn't hear the second person. Who was that?
That was Jason.
Oh, hey, Jason. Okay, we got a second, Carl. All in favor of adjournment? Say aye.
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 Unanimously adjourned. Carl, you want to take it from there? Are we good to go?
That's all there is, Chair.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everybody.
Thank you all so much.